Hello, my name is Joe Parks. I'm a technical support engineer with Cole Morgan, and I focus supporting the KAS IDE software to develop PLC and motion control programs for our EtherCAT master controllers. The latest line is the PCMM 2G, or the second generation of our EtherCAT masters. And this video is going to help show you how to set up the new Cole Morgan Essential demo kits that are being sent out. With a Cole Morgan Essential drive, a KED drive, a KED motor, KED cables, a full system, and also either a PCMM 2G or some come with a PCMM first generation motion controller. So this will first show you how to use just any web browser to access the web server to connect to the PCMM controllers to make sure that you know what firmware level is loaded into them and what IP address is set up with them. Make sure that your computer is on a compatible network and that you can connect to the device. And after that, we'll go in and use the KAS IDE software to download just a template-based project. You don't need to do any programming. You're just opening up a default template program and downloading it to the controller after scanning and finding the Essentials drive on the system. And then next step is another option if you want to map in the switches and the LEDs on the front of the demo system. You can do that as well, so you don't have to run the project through your computer. You could have the switches to enable, disable, and start moves on the demo system. Before I use the KAS IDE software to connect to the PCMM controller in the KED Demo System, I'm going to first start off and go to the web server, make sure that I know the IP address and the firmware that's loaded in the controller right now, and also knowing what type of controller you have. Different demo systems will come with a PCMM 2G, so that's our latest and greatest second generation EtherCAT master controller. Some also have some of our first generation PCMM controllers. They both have the same shape, form factor, connectors. You can tell easily enough if there's a 2G right in the front here. The newer ones will say PCMM 2G. The originals will just say PCMM. Another quick way to tell is the original or first generation controllers had SD card slots, whereas the new second generation controllers have a USB slot on the front to do backup and restore functionality. And also there's a rotary switch, just like KED drives, and this is going to be in the same spot, the same switch for both first gen and PCMM 2Gs, and this is going to determine what IP address the drive has. 0 is for DHCP, so it'll get an IP address assigned by whatever it's connected to, whether it's a controller or a router or a switch. 1 through 9 are for static IPs, or IPs that won't change. 2 through 9 will use our default, meaning the first bunch of numbers are always the same, and the latch digit will be set by the rotary switch. So it will be 192.168.0.10, and it will be either 101, 2, 3, all the way up to 109, depending on what that rotary switch is set to. Also, if it's set to 1 out of the box, it'll go to this IP address, 192.168.0.101, but that's also reserved for, you can come through in a different tab of the web server. If you go to settings, network, users can set their own static IP to whatever range they want. So this is what customers will eventually do, but probably not what you need to do to just connect up to the demo system. I'd expect you to go back to the home screen, use that rotary switch for 0 for DHCP, if that's what your computer is on, or set a static IP, and then you can go through your Windows settings, make sure your Ethernet connection to the controller has a compatible IP address, so the first 3 sections are the same, but the last section is different. Then you'll be able to go to any web browser and just type the IP address in, and it'll bring up these screens. You can set up a number of parameters, check things, settings on the controller without even having software installed on your system. So I'm specifically going to go in the Settings tab to check that the firmware I have loaded on my unit. So right now I have a PCMM 2G, so that says runtime version is 5.00. And really just these first 3 digits are the ones that matter. I have to have KAS IDE software, that's the development software, that these first 3 digits match. So 5.0, this is going to be just in the beta range right now. So I'd expect either 4.05 or earlier versions to be loaded on the controllers that were sent out with the KED demos. So you have 2 choices. You can either keep the firmware version on your controller the same and then get a KAS IDE software to match, or if you have a certain version of KAS IDE software, you have the newest and you want to get the newest firmware, you can, from our website, download a matching firmware version. Make sure that it is the firmware specifically for the part number of controller you have, whether it's a PCMM first generation or second generation, and then you can use the web server here to update the firmware. The upgrade button is locked by default. You would have to go log in. The default username and administrator, or username and password, are both administrator, all lowercase. So if you did want to come in here and change the firmware, you could just have to log in first, and then you're able to choose the file and update the firmware. So once you've done that, then you're ready to go over to the KAS IDE software. So this is, once again, a 5.00 version of firmware on my controller. So I'm going to go and use the 5.00 version of software that I have in my computer. And now that I know that I have a matching version of KAS IDE software and firmware on my controller, I'm going to start up just a brand new project in the KAS IDE software. You need to go to File, New, or click the plus for Create New Project in the top left corner of the software. And this is also, first thing you need to do is choose the controller type. So this is first generation or second generation. This is why we needed to know what type of controller you have. I have a PCMM 2G device on my demo system. If you pick the wrong one, it's no big deal. You can go back and change this later. Also, in North America, PLC Open Motion Engine, so that's an international standard for motion function blocks, is typically what all of our customers use. So I'm going to click the PLC Open template section. And then this is a little counterintuitive. The KED demos just have the one essentials drive and motor, but I'm going to choose a 2-axis template just because they're it even says here the 1-axis templates are pretty simple. There's not too much to them. There's a lot more function blocks pre-built into the 2-axis templates, and it's no big deal. We can still run it even though we just have one motor. The other one will just be simulated. So I'm going to choose the 2-axis FFLD for ladder. Feel free to do the structured text if you prefer. It's the exact same function blocks, the exact same functionality with the 2 projects, just programmed in the different editors. So I click Finish. It's going to load the project into my software, and then the next step will be to set the IP address. Now once again, I have the default 192.168.0.101 IP address on my controller. That's just the default when you start a new template project. You might have to right click and go to the properties if you need to change that. So you would change that here if you needed to. And also if you accidentally pick the wrong controller type, or you're just changing, you used to run with one controller, now you're running with a different one, you can change that controller type with the radio button and this controller configuration pop-up. And click OK. Next step from the Project Explorer would be to double-click on the EtherCAT section to get it up in the main window and click on Scan Devices. The demos just have the one Essentials drive on it. You can certainly daisy chain other EtherCAT devices if you wanted to run them with your demo. Click OK. I'm going to click No for EtherCAT change. Do you want to compile? Because I'm going to have more changes to do, but if you click Yes, that's fine. You don't want to skip this step though, so map to axis. You will have to go pick either axis 1 or 2. I'm going to pick 1. If you don't, the motion will just be simulated. Nothing will move on your actual demo system. The motor won't move. So you got to do that. Then I can do connect, and I see down here I get some orange on the controller and the local projects. That just means that there's a different project loaded into my controller than what's on my development environment software right here. So to remedy that, I'm going to click this compile and download button. So it just does those 2 things. First it'll do a compile, and then assuming you get a successful compile, which I should because I didn't make any changes to this project except for scanning for the device. And then if you get a successful compile, it will download it and now I know it's done because that orange went away. So I have the same project in my computer as is in my demo system hardware right there. So now I can click this green play button to start the project, and I see that the EtherCAT network is up and running because there are lights on all the Ethernet cable connectors are lighting up. So now to actually run it from my computer here, I could go to my program, go to main. The program animates while I'm running it. I could force variables true. I could find, for example, MC power to send software-enabled signal to the drive. I can scroll down and monitor the positions from MC read actual position, or I could call the variables tied to the jog function block to do a velocity move, or relative or absolute move function blocks. Or you could go to the dictionary and find the variables that are tied to those function blocks to start them. But it's a lot easier. I go back to my Project Explorer, double-click on Control Panel. This is our built-in GUI, or user interface, for a project. So just the simplest way to run it is to click Enable, and then you can either do the single-axis moves, hold down jog plus, and it's jogging in the positive direction, jog minus, relative move, it moves 90 degrees each time I click this button, and I can see it on my demo. My motor is actually working. All you can do is just monitor the position on the control panel. If you want to kind of home it or zero it out, you can click the set zero button, and it'll do an offset to put it to 0. That's great. I can run it through here. Next up, I actually want to take advantage of the switches and the LED lights tied to the digital outputs of the Essentials drive. And before that, I'm actually going to go show you, if you expand the EtherCAT section here while a project is running, you can double click on KED to bring this device setup. And if you click on the configuration screen, it will connect, and it will basically be the same screens that you'd see in our separate standalone Kollmorgen Workbench application to connect to AKD or Essentials drives. But you don't need to have a USB-C cable to connect to the service port of the Essential drive in your demo. This is going through the PCMM controller, so it's actually loading all the parameters on these screens through EtherCAT. You may have to, and I had to do with this in my demo, go to the device settings and go to actions and just deactivate and clear out all the actions, just because there may have been a preloaded program with different actions loaded tied to the different switches to enable and run motion, but then it would run it through the trajectory generator or the action table on the Essentials drive, not through your KAS project. So if you want to do it through the KAS project, you can clear this action table out. If you need to, you could also verify that everything's set up in here. You may have to, once again, with the Essentials drive, we have the newest Express setup, and that is also included in the configuration screens inside the KAS IDE software. So you might have to go to the full setup in order to get to this action screen. You'll also notice that in here, some of the screens are not here, so you don't see under motion it's empty, and there is no slider or auto tuner, and that's because I'm running a KAS project right now. When the KAS project is running, the PCMM 2G controller is in charge of the command position, the hardware the software enable. So Workbench couldn't do any of its tuning things because it couldn't command motion to gather data. If you want to, you just have to stop the project, and then it tells you, if you read through the configuration screen, why it's disconnected. You can either start the application or you can enable online configuration mode. I'm going to click toggle online configuration mode, and so this way my project isn't running, the PCMM 2G isn't constantly writing the command position and the control word of the drive. So now some extra streams are unlocked, so I could jog, reduce service motion, I can enable, disable, clear faults through these screens, and also the tuning screen is available. So if you want to do either show off the tuning or just need to tune the demo a little bit, you can do that through the KAS IDE. You don't have to use a separate workbench. I'm going to turn off on the configuration. And now my last step, I wanted to show you how you can map the I/O, both digital and inputs and outputs on the system. So if I go back to the control panel, these are what I want to map. The enable is tied to a variable called close button. This goes back to closing the servo loop to enable. And then disable is open button to open the servo loop. And I also want to do a couple other buttons just to command motion. I'll do jog plus is axis 1 jog plus, and relative move is tied to axis 1 relative. And then I also do the digital outputs to use the LEDs on the front of the demo. I'll tie the B motion engine started. This is just to know that the EtherCAT network goes up and running. And then ready is to tell you that all the axes in the project are enabled. So if I go back either to the tab, or you can go under EtherCAT, double click KED1 again. And this time, instead of configuration, we're going to go to the I/O tab. This is where I can right click and map everything. So they're all global variables. They're not in alphabetical order. Unfortunately, they're in the order that they were created in the project. So if I scroll down, I know that the motion engine started is here. And I right click and I can map ready. It's the first one for my 2 digital outputs. And then I want to map global close button to enable, map open button to disable, map. There's a bunch of different ways to command motion, but I was going to do axis 1 jog plus and map axis 1 relative. So now if I compile and download the project, and once it's done downloading, press start again, I won't have to rely on this control panel. I can enable and command moves just with the switches in front of the KED demo. Once again, you're going to have to take my word for it, but if I flip the first switch, yep, they enabled. I didn't even have to click this enable button. And now if I flip switch 3, it starts jogging in a positive direction. You can see that this is going just as if I were to click this button. Now if I turn that switch off, and now instead flip switch 4, it moves 90 degrees, because that's what I have set up for relative move. So each time I unswitch and switch it, and I could monitor things through the dictionary if I wanted. Here's jog plus. If I flip the switch, it goes from false to true. So that'd be a way if you wanted to have it set up so a project runs. You didn't have to always connect the software up to. You could just to get some motion just with the switches. But note, if you also wanted to do that, you probably want to go on the web server. Once again, enter the IP address in any web browser. You can also get to it from the KAS IDE software by right-clicking the controller level and going to Access Web Server. If you want to have this project automatically start in the KAS Application tab, you just have to click this Auto Start and apply. Otherwise, the KAS project won't start automatically on the boot up of the controller. You'd have to manually choose to start it, either from the push buttons in the front, or the web server, or the KAS IDE software. So that's a quick run through on how you can use the KAS IDE software to get a template program loaded and running in our new Essentials demos.